Hey guys, that's Magic back, and it's time to unleash a super weapon upon the world. That's right, I finally got around to building another deck, and this is all Shadows over Innistrated up. This deck has been finely tuned to be just perfect. I played hundreds and hundreds of games online with it, on X-Mage of course, not that travesty MTGO, and it has a very high win percentage. I mean, if I come up with a deck and it doesn't work at all, I probably won't delete it, but I certainly won't post it on my YouTube channel. I mean, come on. So this has about a 70 to 80% win chance in its current form. It's pretty good at universally stopping what other people are playing right now, so I think for the foreseeable future this will be a very, very competitive high-winning deck for Friday Night Magic. The only problem is I do like to build budget decks, but there's not a whole lot of budget in this one. I mean, you could build a very, very similar deck that's maybe 5 or 10% slower or worse or less flexible for like 90% less money, so don't completely close the video already if you don't want to drop 100 on a deck. There is still hope. Now normally when I make a deck video I do enchantments, artifacts, and then all the creatures, and then all the spells. And then the lands in the sideboard. That wouldn't really make sense, and it really didn't make sense in the past either, sorry about that. So I decided, hey, I'm just going to break it down by what really is the core of the deck, and then the other cards I filled in. The biggest card in this deck, and this is going to come as a surprise to absolutely nobody, is Cryptolith Rite. That card is so stupidly unfair. It's just... it just blows my mind how nobody's put this in a modern deck yet that I know of. But it's actually not that surprising because modern people don't tend to change a lot. There's not a lot of original modern deck architects out there. And the other problem is that a Cryptolith deck would probably be completely from scratch. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to throw it into elves. Like, that might work, but you'd almost just have to say, I'm going to play Cryptolith. It's going to be the main component of the deck, and I'm going to build around it and then come up with something completely new that nobody's seen before. That's the most likely use of that card. So you might have to wait a while before it starts showing up in Modern. That said, it's doing just fine in Standard because all of your creatures, tokens included, which I really think they should have said non-token, can tap for any color mana. So you've got automatic fixing as soon as it's on the field for 2, one of which is colorless. Hello, quite the cost there. And once you're done waiting off Summoning Sickness, you're good. So if you tend to bring in creatures on your opponent's turn, the disadvantage practically disappears, and that's what this deck definitely does. So you can tap a whole buttload of creatures for mana. Great. What else does it do? Well, you've got Veteran Warleader, whose power and toughness equal the number of creatures on the field. So you can probably see where this is going. And then Hanweir Militia Captain. So, she's pretty cool, or he, I honestly can't tell. It looks like somebody I used to work with, so I'm going to say she. Well, it's a 2/2 for 2, which is pretty decent, and of course it's not double white, so a lot of the color fixing in this deck is not really that bad, because obviously it's white-green. And it says at the beginning of just your upkeep, so it's not like a werewolf check, it's only at the beginning of your upkeep, not your opponent's, which is unfortunate. If you control 4 or more creatures, and that includes tokens, transform Hanweir Militia Captain. Then on the other side, she basically turns into Veteran Warleader because her power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, but she's a little bit better because at the beginning of your end step, put out a 1/1 white and black human cleric token onto the battlefield. And in this deck, that really helps you swing with everything because during your end step, your opponent's going to forget about it, hopefully you remember it, and then you throw out a 1/1 and you've got a chump blocker. And of course the fourth cornerstone of this deck, no surprises here, Secure the Wastes. You take mana and you make creatures. So if your creatures can tap for mana, oh my gosh. So you bring out a buttload of tokens with Secure the Waste, then you got 2 creatures with their power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures on the field, including themselves, and then Cryptolith lets all of your creatures tap for mana to bring out more creatures. So what else did I put in the deck? Well, we can't have them getting out stuff that I can't deal with, so we've got Quarantine Field. Now, everybody says, oh, Quarantine Field, it costs so much. Nothing in Standard costs too much. If your deck can't generate 30 mana, then what the hell are you doing? I mean, there's so much mana ramp, it's just ridiculous, especially with all the landfall triggers. I mean, you basically have explosive vegetation and then like 9 more versions of it. In fact, I do have a slightly altered version of this deck that's really funny because it's a little bit more effective if it goes off, but it's less suicide blitzy. So it'll get to like 100 life, but it may or may not win. It's a little susceptible to control, but it's really funny. I might post that one too. So yeah, usually usually not a problem when you've got a line of tokens and they got some stuff you can't deal with to just nuke it with Quarantine Field. I mean, it will get rid of anything that's a non-land. So awoken lands are a bit of a problem. I will not lie. I ran into that a couple times and you just can't remove them. But other than that, I mean, hey, Quarantine Field it up. I mean, it doesn't have flash either, but it's still really, really, really good. I mean, if you could just pick 3 of their permanents and just get rid of them, it's basically an Ulamog and a half. I mean, it's just devastating. At that point, usually you swing and the game's over. The best thing is it's a $1.79 mythic. You really can't go wrong there. Next up, to keep the ball rolling with this deck, we've got Make a Stand. All of your creatures get +1, so it's a win condition. It's also an ambush. And then they also get indestructible. So you can cast it in the middle of combat for 3 mana, which is reasonable. And boom, there you go. You just wrecked all their blockers, wrecked all their plans, or they were dumb enough to let something through, and now you just killed them. In fact, if you're swinging with 15 tokens, you probably did kill them. I mean, that's just... You don't even need to cast that during combat. You can cast it before combat, and they'll start packing up before you even get done tapping them all. And finally, we've got Declaration in Stone, because Quarantine Field, I noticed I was just waiting on it. I would wait on it and wait on it and wait on it, and I was just waiting for it to show up, and it's only 4 cards in the deck. So even with the thinning and the cantrips I threw in here, you just need something else. And I thought, well, you got, Stasis, Snare Field or whatever the hell, and that other one, and Isolation Zone. I mean, there was like 100 copies of that, and I thought, well, the best one is honestly probably Declaration in Stone, because it will hit one target, but it might hit more than one target. Now, it's not very flexible on what it targets, so that's another one where the card is so damn expensive anyway, you could swap it out with like Isolation Zone, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. I mean, this only costs 2, so that's pretty steep, but Isolation Zone has a wider array of things that it can hit. So now that you're controlling the board, what are you hitting them with? Well, let's start with Consul's Lieutenant, one of the most important cards in the entire deck. You've got a 2/1 for 2, and it has First Strike. So that alone is going to stop them early game if you get it out, and it's going to force them to make blocks, because if he gets Renowned, he's a 3/2. But it gets worse if he is Renowned and you swing with him, all other attacking creatures get +1/+1. Ouch! That is just the end of the world most of the time, and then usually they're like, okay, they're 2/2s, I can handle this, like a double block. Boom! +1/+0 and indestructible. Make a stand. Ouch! Now remember, this card and almost every other card in the entire deck are not legendary, including Quarantine Field. You could get multiple of them out. Now Cryptolith, it's like, why would you? So some of the, cards are unimportant that they're not legendary. But getting out more than one Consul's Lieutenant and then getting them both to be Renowned, they'll boost each other, and then everything swinging is +2/+2. So next up, we've got Kor Castigator. It's just a 3/1 for 2 that can't be blocked by Scions. I mean, nothing real special other than the big damage. I kind of consider it like a Death Toucher, because it'll sit there and just make them not want to swing because they're going to lose something that has 3 or less toughness. And it's a really good make a stand target too. It's also an ally, which reminds me that I forgot to mention that Veteran Warleader has a special ability. It says, tap another untapped ally you control. Veteran Warleader gains your choice of First Strike, Vigilance, or Trample until end of turn. Unbelievable. And it's not cohort because you don't have to actually tap Veteran Warleader. So if it's a 20/20, you just gave it Trample, but just by tapping an ally, ouch. So that's why Kor is the choice I went with, but that's one of the most flexible cards in there. If you want to throw something in like, I don't know, Knight of the White Orchid, go for it. So we got Consuls, and then the Kor Castigator, Veteran Warleader, and Hanweir as the 4 creatures, and that's it, because the rest are tokens, so you're usually good with just that low count of creatures, which there's only 15 total if you look at the actual card counts. But next up, we've got an enchantment called Angelic Gift. I was having trouble beating flyers because of the lack of removal and the lack of, Windstorm. That cycled out. Plummet is still there, but that's not quite good enough, so I thought, well, I could win the game if I gave Hanweir or Veteran flying, because then it would be like a 15/15 flyer, and they would just nuke the person, and also I could just make anything blocking that I wanted. And then I also realized that I need more card draw or scry or just some sort of deck thinning, let's go type of ability to get through the deck quicker. So Angelic Gift just pops out, gives him flying, and draws a card. So it basically replaces itself, and you have virtually limitless mana, so it's almost a free spell. So I really think that was a good choice to put in there. And believe it or not, that's the end of the deck. That is all that's in it. It's so simplistic and fast. And the reason it's so fast and generate so much mana is because, as you may have suspected due to the card count right now, there are actually 23 lands in there. And trust me, I tried playing with 21. It's unplayable. Absolutely unplayable. You will not get to 3. You will never cast Secure the Waste for a reasonable amount, which means Cryptolith is going to mean nothing. You'll never get to double cast a 2-cost creature, and the whole thing just collapses. So you really do need 3 land on turn 3 and 4 land on turn 4 on the field, or it just doesn't work. So because of that, I found a pretty good balance to be 3 Fortified Villages, 2 Canopy Vistas, 2 Forests, and 14 Plains. Now you can tweak that, you can up it to 3 forests, you could lower the number of duels, you could up the number of duels, or you could go all fortified with no canopy, you could go all canopy with no fortified. It just depends when you think that you're going to need the mana, because canopy is like, okay, I drew it late, it comes in, I can use it immediately, which is usually nice. But then fortified is like, okay, it came in early, and now I've got early color fixing because I had a land in my hand, but late game it's useless, it's guaranteed to come in tapped. I'm actually leaning towards going 3 canopies and 2 fortified villages, but I only technically own 2 canopies at the moment, so I just left it at 2. I know, flawless deck building logic over here. So yeah, it is 60 cards on the dot, because this is the type of deck that you absolutely want to hold to 60, because of cards like Quarantine Field and Declaration in Stone. You don't want to dilute those cards, and especially Secure the Waste. Now there are other decks where it's just like 20 heroic creatures and 20 spells and 20 lands. You could go up to 70 if you really wanted, because there's almost no negative consequence. Now, there are a bigger chance to get like land screwed in decks like that, where you hit a giant pool of land or you hit a giant desert of land with no land, just because of how probability works. But other than that, you're not really waiting on any card. You're not like, oh, I have to get to these 4 cards, and now it's 4 out of 70 instead of 4 out of 60. So there are perfectly appropriate times when you could go way above 60 and the deck still works perfectly. Don't let the so-called pros tell you anything different, because honestly, the real pros who know what they're talking about will tell you, yeah, 68 card deck's just fine if you're going to do this, this, and this to it, and you built it this way. But like a combo deck or a deck that relies on 4 to 8 cards that all do the same thing, yeah, you're going to want to definitely keep it to 60. Now, if this deck seemed a little bit light on creatures, keep in mind that 2 of the lands are actually Westvale Abbey. Yes, I did throw them in. This is supposed to be a budget deck, but it was just so much stronger with cards like that, and Secure the Waste, which is like, I don't know, $9 to $12 a piece, I think, right now. Ouch. So I thought, why cripple the deck? But you could easily take them out and still win with just the cards that are already in the deck. I think this deck is probably a little bit over $100 as it sits, but you could get it down to about 25 to 30 just by replacing a couple of the more expensive cards with slightly slower or slightly less powerful versions. Cryptolith is not bad. I mean, that's a backbone, but it's only $4. Quarantine Field, like I said, about $2. Angelic Gift, practically free. Consul's Lieutenant, practically free. Kor Castigator, come on. Veteran Warleader, I don't even know. I think it's like $1 tops. Hanweir Militia Captain is about $1.50, $2 for now. I think it might go up. Make a Stand is practically free. Secure the Waste is pretty expensive, but it's another backbone of the deck, so, you know, whatever. And then Declaration in Stone is extremely expensive, but swap it out with a different exile spell. So, you know, then just drop Westvale Abbey and you're down to a reasonable price. But if you can get your hands on some Westvale Abbeys in trade, holy crap. So you pay 5, tap it, pay 1 life, and all you get is a 1/1 white and black human cleric token on the battlefield. That sucks. It'll drive up your numbers. It's kind of like bringing out a free land if you have Cryptolith out, so it's a little bit useful. Usually I don't use that one, though. It's nice as an emergency blocker that they didn't see coming, because people don't read the damn card. But if you pay 5 mana, which could easily have been generated by 5 tokens, then sacrifice 5 creatures, like those 5 tokens you just tapped, you transform it into what? That's right, Ormondal. It's a freaking 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible haste creature. So even if you dropped in Westvale that turn, you can still swing with him if you flip him. This is like game ending, but, you know, for the cost of it, I think it's like $15-20 a piece for this card. You could just have a Veteran Warleader 15/15 flyer. You know, so it's like, it's not the most important thing in the deck, but it's cool. I mean, it's definitely fun to win with it. Your opponent won't think so, though. Now, the sideboard is where it gets a little bit weird. All of my sideboards are a little bit weird, but I always tell people there is usually 1 or 2 cards in the sideboard that really should be there. They just generally handle something that like, is a thing that could happen to the deck. The other 2 slots in your sideboard should almost definitely be just your local meta. Like, what are people playing that you have to deal with? You just fill it in yourself. But as it sits, I've got Ondu Rising in case somebody's playing too high of a damage deck, like some kind of drain away white-black vampire, BFZ, OGW kind of thing. Or even like, the Aristocrats, that deck where like everything that they do drains the health away, stuff like that. A lot of Calistria healer type of stuff. Oh, and Zulaport Cutthroat. Everybody loves that combo. So if somebody's playing something like that, you're definitely going to want to put in Ondu Rising. And I would even maybe slip in to the deck main-boarded Blighted Steppe. Because, yeah, it's expensive, but, I mean, mana means nothing to this deck. Generating 20-30 mana is nothing on, like, turn 7 or 8. So it gains you life based on how many creatures are on the field. So I hate cards that are like, if you're already winning, win more, because they're pointless. But sometimes it's like, if you're already winning, but you think they might turn the game around, gain 20 life. So there is a reasonable, chance that you would put that in, or at least sideboard it. And then the other 2 slots are actually Angelic Purge, in case you just need a little bit more removal. Like, they're really, really, really getting out stuff you can't deal with, like Thing in the Ice or Westvale Abbey. I mean, what kind of jerk would use Westvale Abbey in a deck? Jeez, it's just disgusting. Just to even the thought of it. Oh my gosh. It might even be like a swap card with Declaration in Stone because of the wider array of things that it can hit. And then the other concept in my sideboard is, what if they're removing my creatures with a lot of really good removal, and they figured out that the best ones to remove are the Veteran Warleader and the Hanweir, because those are the ones where their power and toughness are based on the number of creatures. So if I'm swinging with a 10-10 or a 15-15, yeah, you're going to have to worry about that. So if they're figuring it out, well, it's perfect. Strap Murder Investigation to it. So if you put it on there and it's a 12-12 and it dies, not gets exiled, but dies, then you get 12 tokens, because that's the current power of the creature. It's not the printed power on the card, it's the current power. I originally had Murder Investigation mainboarded, but I kept picking it up a little bit too early, and I kept having to strap it to like tokens, and that's cool. They can chump block, then immediately like regenerate, sort of. But whatever. I mean, I just thought, well, if they're not running removal, why is it in my deck? I need the deck to be really fast and just run them over. And a lot of the time, this deck will win on turn 5 or 6, believe it or not. It's a little bit of an ideal starting hand to do that, but if it does work, there's just not much early game removal. I mean, a lot of the removal costs like 4 and 5 to really, really work. Like, for example, Languish. I mean, they are not going to get a Languish off by the time you kill them. That is just not going to happen. Now, if you're worried about Declaration in Stone, good, you should be, but not much you can do about that. I mean, it's white-green. I mean, whatever. There might be a card that still grants hexproof, like Ranger's Guile or something. I didn't really look because I didn't think it would come up much. I just thought, well, the creature is expendable. Usually I end up with 2 or 3 of the power and toughness equal number of creatures on the battlefield anyway. So if they blew up 1, I'm still going to kill them with the other 2, and I'm probably going to give 1 flying. So it just didn't seem that important. But you might have noticed I left a gap in the sideboard. I actually only put Angelic Purge, Murder Investigation, and Ondu Rising. Even I'm just going to wait and see what people are beating me with at my local gaming store and then fill in the gap. So I might literally put like 4 planes in there in the spot. Or just something just silly, like, I don't know, like another creature, like a flyer, in case they're just kicking my butt with flyers, like spirits or something. I don't know. I know one good card is Misthoof Kieran, because that'll definitely shut down flyers. It's a morph, so that's kind of cool. You got your colorless going if you needed it. And it's a mega morph, and it's flying and vigilance. So it is definitely a big, giant air blocker. So that's probably going to sit in my sideboard for now, and then I might put something a little bit better in later. So I hope you guys like this deck. If you don't, there's clearly something wrong with you, because this is a very, very exceptionally good deck. Now, the funny thing is, it will win without Cryptolith Rite coming out. So a lot of people are saying, well, the problem with Cryptolith is the same as Willbreaker. Willbreaker was a great card, but there's only 4 of it. Willbreaker, they could just kill it. But Cryptolith Rite, there's not a whole lot of enchantment removal. Because a lot of the best decks rely on an enchantment. So they didn't want to put in like 5 enchantment removal cards and spread them across the colors. So you can get away with it, but if you never pull it in the game, you'll probably still win, because it's just a lot of aggro coming at you. I mean, if you have 23 lands, you're just naturally going to feed a lot of mana in to secure the waste. You could be putting out 4 or 5 tokens in a reasonable amount of time. And then a lot of the win condition effects are actually passive. I mean, yeah, you could +1 them with that spell, but you're going to +1 them just by swinging with the Renown ability. So everything is passive. And then, oh, I just used Secure the Waste. Now I passively brought up the power and toughness of the 2 creatures where their power and toughness equal the number of creatures. And that's actually the #1 win condition, is to swing with Veteran Warleader. And then they say, okay, I won't block. It's only a 2/2, whatever. Boom, Secure the Waste for every single mana, every land you got on the field, tap every single token, every single creature, and bring out like 12 tokens and then hit them for 14 instead of 2 and just win the game. I love the fact that Secure the Waste is instant speed, and it clearly really should not be. It's a little bit too powerful to do that. I mean, people are getting mad about like Raise the Alarm, just, you know, chump blocking everybody and ruining everything, and oh, shutting down all the red blitz decks. Well, have you seen Secure the Waste? You could take down a Hydra with that card. I mean, it's like, oh, you're swinging with a Hydra and I've got nothing on the board. Ha ha ha, septuple block. So anyway, watch the channel for some awesome gameplay footage. I really don't feel like editing me playing against a human, but trust me, I have a very high win percentage against all the top decks that everybody's playing now from the last tournament. But I will show it beating really, really competitive speed aggro decks. Not exactly legal ones. I'm going to have to set it on modern because they're my slightly older standard testing decks, but I tend to obliterate them about 95% of the time, and if it's 5%, it's because I kept a crappy hand. Now, this is extremely sensitive to keeping crappy hands, and they might not appear crappy, but then 3 turns in, you're like, oh, I am kind of shut down. Oops. So it takes a lot of practice. Definitely practice. You should definitely hop on Xmage. Great program. And speaking of Xmage, I'll put the deck list in DCK file format. So what you do is you open Notepad, you paste the name to the end where it says sideboard : and then the end of that line, you paste it into Notepad, and then go to File, Save As, and then instead of TXT file, you change it to all files, and then add .dck. Boom, it can be imported directly into Xmage. And that's the way I'll be referencing a lot of deck lists right now, so if it looks really weird in a format nobody uses, I mean, I didn't pick it out, it's just a DCK file. I'll see you guys next video, and hopefully you'll have fun just demolishing everything in your path at FNM.